believe they wouldn't be spinning their wheels or wasting their time. They believe that they are going to be able to develop enough witness information and physical evidence through these search warrants that they want to file charges.
From federal raids and possible criminal charges to shocking allegations laid out in multiple bombshell lawsuits, P. Diddy has found himself in some serious hot water. But could Diddy's past be coming back to haunt him?
That crime could be reopened and say this is a RICO predicate act, and then you add a couple more acts under the sex trafficking, the drugs, the gun, and certainly that 1999 shooting could be the cornerstone of a case like that.
We're taking a closer look at the 1999 nightclub shooting in New York and what a new investigation could look like.
Sometimes with time, with the passage of time, people aren't as intimidated and they're not as threatened, and they get away from the person who is the threat, and they feel more forthcoming to testify or to give statements in lieu of testimony.
Right off the bat, let's be clear that Sean Combs, also known as P. Diddy, Diddy, Puffy, Puff Daddy, he's not been charged with anything criminally. That being said, the feds have raided 2 of his homes, one in Florida and the other in California. That news broke last Monday, and we've since seen images of Homeland Security investigating both properties. As far as what's happening there, we're not entirely sure. We can't even confirm whether Diddy is the target of the federal investigation. So I spoke with former FBI agent Bobby Chacon to get a better understanding. Could we use reasonable inferences to kind of deduce that Diddy is the subject or target of this investigation?
Absolutely. I mean, look, this didn't occur in a vacuum. There's a long history here of people that work for Diddy or were close to Diddy alleging sexual abuse, gun trafficking, drugs, violence. This is a long body of information of more than one person, multiple people who are unrelated to each other, who make similar allegations of this type of conduct being conducted by him, not by somebody else, but by him, both in civil suits and in criminal trials, one where he got acquitted. So there's a lot to, like you say, to kind of infer that he's probably the subject of this investigation.
But what's next? Is it possible that there could be additional raids of Diddy's properties?
Sure. People should remember about the raids, too. They were the subject of a search warrant, which means that HSI, Homeland Security's investigations, went before a magistrate judge and proved with probable cause that there was specific evidence of a specific crime located in a specific place. That is the place to be searched. That is Diddy's residence. So the Constitution requires specificity so that they had to show probable cause that there was evidence of a crime in those places. So, and it can't be old because you have to have fresh probable cause. So the way we used to do that is send an informant or an undercover agent in there and they see the evidence, and then you build that into an affidavit. You go before a judge, you say, Judge, we have this information that there's probable cause that this evidence exists in that place, and we want the right to go in there and search for it. And so, it's interesting to see. Obviously, we haven't seen those affidavits and what HSI was looking for and how they think they know it's in there. But it's recent information, and we know that there have been some civil lawsuits with Diddy, again, people that worked for him, that were very close to him, that were in those houses. And it'd be interesting to see those affidavits and what exactly they were looking for, but even more importantly, why they thought that evidence existed in those places.
And just in your opinion, based on this investigation and everything you know right now, do you believe that charges are forthcoming against P. Diddy?
The fact that they are conducting search warrants really means it's an active investigation, and they believe they wouldn't be spinning their wheels or wasting their time. They believe that they are going to be able to develop enough witness information and physical evidence through these search warrants that they want to file charges. You don't do this without the ultimate goal of filing charges against someone and putting them in jail. That's why you undergo these efforts. So I think that, in my opinion, certainly they are working with a federal prosecutor somewhere on a case. Maybe they've already impaneled a federal grand jury, who's hearing evidence and witness testimony. And yeah, I believe that they are working towards filing charges. Now, whether they ultimately meet the burden of filing charges, that's yet to be seen. But I certainly think that that's their expectation.
Before the feds executed these search warrants at Diddy's properties, a laundry list of pretty shocking allegations were laid out against him through multiple lawsuits. First, there's the one filed by Cassandra Ventura. That's the singer Cassie. She dated Diddy for many years and was allegedly held down by Mr. Combs and endured over a decade of his violent behavior and disturbed demands. That's according to her civil suit filed back in November, where she laid out some pretty serious allegations, like that Diddy beat her, sometimes so severely that she had to hide out in hotels for days at a time waiting for the bruises to heal. Cassie also alleged that Diddy raped her and forced her to have sex with prostitutes and even recorded that. Cassie also name-dropped in her lawsuit, saying that when she started a flirtatious relationship with rapper Kid Cudi, Diddy got jealous and blew up his car. Cassie filed this suit under the New York Survivor Act that allowed any sexual assault survivor to bring forward a civil suit against their alleged abuser, even if the statute of limitations had run out. Bobby brought up Cassie's suit because it was settled in just one day.
I think there was a civil suit just in November, this past November, that was literally settled one day after it was filed. That's a lightning speed in a civil case. And to settle it that quickly means he wanted it to go away. I assume they made the plaintiff sign NDAs and stuff, but those are the types of things that you look at. Why was it settled so quickly?
Just this week, news broke that Cassie is cooperating with federal investigators, which is something I talked to Bobby about too. Could she still testify against him, still speak with investigators?
Yeah, she could. She could certainly, and because the NDA is simply between Diddy and her, or their parties there too, the lawsuit, and so the government is not party to that, and so she could, she could testify, and then Diddy, even if he wanted to, could sue her civilly again for violating the NDA. But people violate their NDAs every day, and then he has a civil remedy to go back after her, but her criminal testimony in a grand jury or a trial would still be valid. I mean, you can't discredit somebody with an NDA. You can actually go after them civilly for violating the NDA that you have with them. But their testimony, even if it's in violation of the NDA, is still credible if you can back it up with other independent corroborative sources. So, I think she could certainly, violate the NDA. The government could possibly make a deal with her for her testimony. But yeah, she could violate the NDA. It's only between her and Diddy, and then he has a civil case to go after her.
According to Bobby, Cassie's lawsuit could have started the federal investigation into Diddy in the first place.
This lawsuit in November that was lightning speed settled really fast. And you said there were very serious allegations in that lawsuit. I would be surprised if that lawsuit and those allegations were not part of the current investigation. In other words, may have even been what spurred the whole thing, what started the whole thing, because those are serious allegations in that lawsuit, and I've never seen a civil lawsuit settled that quickly. That means that Diddy's people wanted that thing to go away. They did not want it talked about in the media. They wanted it settled and gone very, very quickly. And that probably piqued the interest of some of HSI's investigators. I'd be really surprised if that wasn't the thing that started them looking back.
Could it be possible that they were working for months in order to get this search warrant to execute at Diddy's properties?
Absolutely, because what you have is oftentimes you start with an allegation of, oh, I know he has this evidence in this place. But then that's, again, hearsay. So when you build an affidavit of probable cause, oftentimes you have to get somebody in there to literally see it with their eyes. And I used to do that all the time with informants in drug cases where they would have to go in and see the drugs, and it has to be refreshed. It has to be fresh information. So they probably worked for months. Maybe they got somebody inside to see the things that somebody else alleged were in there. And then you quickly go to a judge when you have that information. They saw it in there last Tuesday, Your Honor. We need to go in and get it. Or we need to go in and search for it. And so, those are the types of things. So yes, if they started in November, they likely tried to get somebody on the inside to go in there and see the things that they put into the affidavit that they wanted to search for. And then that person said, yeah, they are in that house. And so that gives them the right. In other words, you can't just say he has evidence anywhere, somewhere. You have to have specific information of it's in that house or it's in that house. And then the judge signs off on your probable cause affidavit and gives you the right to go into those places.
So we've established it was potentially Cassie's lawsuit that bolstered a federal case against Diddy, leading to the execution of search warrants at his homes. But it's possible additional lawsuits also contributed to the feds taking notice. Just to list a few, there's plaintiff Joy Dickerson Neal, who says Diddy raped her in 1991 when she was a college student. Joy actually alleges she's a victim of revenge porn because Diddy apparently recorded the rape and showed the video to other people. Liza Gardner also says Diddy raped her in New York in the early 90s and also alleges at one point he became so irate that he began assaulting and choking her to the point that she passed out. Jane Doe says Diddy raped her in 2003 when she was just a junior in high school. She says his friends met her at a club in Michigan and flew her out to Diddy's studio in New York. She even included pictures of her and Diddy in the lawsuit. And then there's the giant lawsuit that made major news in the past few weeks. This is the 74-page suit brought against Diddy and several others by plaintiff Rodney Jones, also known as Lil Rod. So Lil Rod produced several songs on Diddy's Love album and worked with him for about a year. Lil Rod alleges that during this time, Diddy required Lil Rod to live with him for months on end, during which time he was subjected to a variety of abuse. Lil Rod alleges Diddy sexually assaulted him, forced him to have sex with prostitutes, and recorded hundreds of hours of illegal activity, sometimes with hidden cameras. There's a lot to unpack in Lil Rod's lawsuit, and several celebrity names that are dropped too, like Prince Harry, Cuba Gooding Jr., and Jennifer Lopez. J-Lo brings us back to that 1999 nightclub shooting, which investigators may soon take a closer look at. Here's what Lil Rod's lawsuit says, quote, Mr. Combs shared that he was responsible for the shooting in the nightclub in New York City with rapper Shyne. Mr. Combs' girlfriend at the time, Jennifer Lopez, aka J-Lo, carried the gun into the club for him and passed him the gun after he got into an altercation with another individual. Another huge name that was dropped in this civil suit is Jennifer Lopez, or J-Lo, who was dating Diddy at the time. And according to Lil Rod's lawsuit, she carried an illegal firearm that was used in the shooting. Now, she was charged at the time, but then those charges were dropped. What does all of this mean for J-Lo? Is it possible that the feds are already talking to her?
It's absolutely possible, and I would say you would have to. Now she may, divorce herself of the whole thing and say, no, I don't remember, I wasn't there, it never happened. But yeah, she's accused of not only carrying the gun into the club for Diddy, but then once the altercation happened, handing Diddy the gun that he then used in the shooting, allegedly. So she would certainly be on the witness list to talk to, take a statement from her, see what her recollection is, see what her attitude is. And she'd be somebody that they would be very interested in speaking with.
So it's possible J-Lo is talking to the feds about what's happening now, but it's also possible that an investigation into the 1999 shooting is reopened. For those unfamiliar, it happened on December 27th, 1999 at about 2:55 a.m. A fight broke out at a nightclub in New York City between Diddy, Jamal Barrow, known as the rapper Shyne, and this guy, Matthew Allen, who went by the nickname Scar. Guns were drawn and 3 people were shot. No one suffered any life-threatening injuries and the victims were not involved with the fight. But that's where we get these famous mugshots of Diddy and J-Lo because they were arrested in connection to the shooting. J-Lo's charges were dropped, but the charges for Diddy and Shyne held up. Some witnesses say they believe Diddy was responsible for the shooting, but it was Shyne who faced the more severe charges, 3 counts of attempted murder and criminal possession of a weapon. Both Diddy and Shyne went to trial, where Shyne maintained he acted in self-defense. Diddy was acquitted, but Shyne was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was released in 2009 and deported to his home country of Belize. But Lil Rod's allegations about the shooting could mean investigators are taking another look at the case. If there's a civil lawsuit that lays out this major allegation, what would it take to reopen an investigation into something that happened 25 years ago?
Well, it would take a different look at it. So in other words, he was acquitted on the state murder charges. Now, federal charges can be different. You can have RICO, you can have a continuing criminal enterprise, you can have, so the underlying acts, the predicate acts, if we used to call them when I worked RICO cases, a RICO predicate act could be something like that 1999 case, and you can use it as a predicate act. You can bring it up. When I worked cold cases of this type, sometimes with time, with the passage of time, people aren't as intimidated and they're not as threatened, and they get away from the person who is the threat, and they feel more forthcoming to testify or to give statements in lieu of testimony. But certainly, I think that that case is going to be part of it. In the aftermath of that, they have witnesses that say he bragged about intimidating witnesses, paying off jurors. And certainly when you have that kind of stuff, if you go back and you find that juror that was paid off, or jurors, multiple, that may have been paid off, certainly that gives you the impetus to kind of come forward and refresh those charges on a federal case. So the federal cases will be a little different. The charges are a little different, so it's not double jeopardy. And so I think that case that you mentioned, that you cite, I think is certainly one of the ones they're looking to build into a much bigger, to me, maybe a RICO type case.
It's interesting. You talked about the passage of time, and people who are witnesses or involved may be less afraid to come forward with their information. That's what we've seen from Natanya Rubin. She was one of the victims in the shooting, one of the people who was shot actually in the face. And in recent days, she's come forward and said, hey, it was P. Diddy who shot me. So could her allegations change things, increase the likelihood of an investigation ahead?
Oh, absolutely. When you have a witness like that, and I've seen those videos of her. I mean, she said, look, I was shot in the face, so I was staring at the person who shot me. I know it was him. I mean, that's pretty strong evidence. The defense obviously tried to discredit her, but that's pretty strong evidence from a victim of a crime like that. She wasn't shot in the back where she couldn't see. She was literally shot in the face, and she said, I was looking right at the person who shot me. So yeah, that's very, very strong evidence, and certainly, I'm sure they've talked to her already, and she would be a strong witness.
We reached out to Natanya, but she told our booking producer she doesn't want to give us a comment. Someone who did want to comment, though, is rapper Mark Curry, who appeared alongside Diddy on the famous track Bad Boy for Life. He was friends with Diddy for years before they eventually had a falling out. Mark has publicly alleged that Diddy paid off Shyne to take the fall for him and serve a prison sentence in that 1999 shooting. But when I asked him about this allegation, he kind of skirted around the question.
I know that the incident that happened at Club New York it was with Puff and Shyne, and J-Lo was there, and Wolf was there. It was a very unfortunate situation because it was a female, I believe, that may have got shot or something like that during the situation, but it was not a good situation. And I don't say it was a payoff, but you say Shyne went and did a long time in prison, and then when he came home from prison, they extradited him and made him go back to Belize. And he couldn't come back and put his foot on the United States soil again. And to me, I was like, why? Only thing, he didn't really do anything to really get to where he can't come back. And then when you broke down everything, it was his voice would have been too powerful to say the truth. So in order to hide the truth, let's hide the person that has the voice. So to me, it was like, yo, you're hiding the person with the voice because you don't want him to tell his truth. And that's that. So it's like, okay, for you to go over here and live, it was a time where I think they had gave him a record deal, and he was supposed to do an album, and we never heard an album from him. But to me, the money that they gave him to do the record deal, the way that it was given to him and how that process went was just kind of a way to give him some money to say, hey, you know what? Take care of yourself, live life. Here's something from someone. And that's how that one went.
I asked Bobby about this too. So we've talked a bit about witnesses, even a victim in this case, but what about people who weren't there but are close to Diddy and have heard things from him? For instance, I'm referring to Mark Curry. We actually spoke with him here on Law&Crime. He was a rapper alongside Diddy on several of his songs and albums, and he in the past had talked about how Diddy told him there had been a payoff, saying that Shyne took the fall for Diddy, but it really was Diddy who fired the weapon. Is it possible that he could be contacted by investigators too?
Absolutely. And people like him are very valuable to an investigation, even though possibly they may never be able to testify because what he knows is hearsay, right? You can't have testimony for a jury of someone saying, I heard this from someone else. You need the direct witness. But that's not to say he can't be very valuable to an investigation. And kind of leading them in different directions, and different other people that might know have heard it directly. And or you also could have Diddy making a statement against interest, which there are exceptions to the hearsay rules that you might be able to, a prosecutor will be able to talk to a guy like that and say, is this an exception to the hearsay rule? Somebody like that could be very valuable in a number of different ways, even if he never testifies.
And I asked about Shyne. So we know back in the early 2000s is when Diddy's trial actually happened and he was acquitted. But what about Shyne? He was actually convicted and ended up serving 10 years in prison, or he was sentenced to it rather, and then eventually was deported back to his home country of Belize. What does all of this mean for him if Diddy was in fact the person who shot the gun?
Well, I mean, obviously he'd be somebody they want to talk to and see what exactly happened. If he did take the fall, if he's still, even after all this time now and distance from Diddy, if he's still willing to cover for him. But certainly he could, he could be a witness to say, yeah, Diddy had me take the fall or whatever, and then he could have his own civil suit against Diddy. It's unknown. I mean, certainly HSI and the FBI have reached. We have an office in Belize, so I mean, there's reach down there to go and talk to him. I'd be surprised if they haven't spoken to him either by phone or in person yet. I mean, they have an office in Belize as well. So HSI. So I mean, I think that he could be a valuable person to talk to if he's willing.
Even if investigators do take another look at this shooting through a new lens, they're pushing up against nearly 3 decades worth of change. As far as the whole time passage thing that we've been discussing, this happened way back in 1999, so 25 years ago. One of the main players has died since then. I'm sure multiple other witnesses may have passed on or moved, things like that, maybe forgotten about it. So how would that play into all of this, the difficulty of the passage of time?
Yeah, so like I said, the one of the benefits of a cold case is that passage of time where people aren't as intimidated, and maybe the power that the person originally had is no longer there. But what you're citing now is the disadvantage also of cold cases is that memories fade, people move away, people die. And so, yeah, that's the downside of a cold case like this. Not necessarily a cold case, but a historical case like this is going back, finding that evidence, finding those people, refreshing their recollections, and getting new statements and seeing where they are now in their mind and in their life and stuff. Yeah, that's the downside of it, of working a historical case like this. And it is an issue, and it takes a lot of hard work. And you have to kind of find people, and then you have to convince people kind of to revisit these very unfortunate times in their lives and these very painful memories that they have.
So if investigators are going back and talking to a lot of witnesses or people who are involved, and let's say they've forgotten about it or they don't remember specifics, is it possible that they go through with this investigation and then nothing becomes of it, no additional charges are brought?
Well, that's always a possibility in any investigation. When you first start out, you are moving towards an indictment or charges being filed, hopefully. But yeah, there's a lot of cases that you try and you just come up short, and that doesn't mean that the crimes didn't happen. We've had a lot of very public pronouncements of charges not being filed in certain cases and stuff. That never means that the person was innocent or the crimes didn't happen by that person. It means that they never met the threshold. Now, oftentimes investigators feel they've met the threshold, but prosecutors who have to stand up in court before a judge and a jury are the ones that really have to be comfortable with the amount of evidence that they have. They need to convict beyond a reasonable doubt. And so there's always this kind of push and pull between investigators that feel they have enough and prosecutors who want a little more. And granted, it's the prosecutor who rules the day, because they're the ones that have to stand up in court, and it's their reputation on the line. So they have to be comfortable with the amount of evidence you have. But sometimes you do fall short, and you have what you think is enough, or you have a lot, but you just don't have enough. And that's always a risk in any investigation.
We still don't know whether the investigation has been reopened, but it is possible. What is the likelihood that an investigation is already reopened into this shooting from 1999?
Well, I think it's likely that they're re-looking at that. If they're looking at this, as I said, and this is the way I built my gang cases and my mafia cases is under the RICO statute. If you're looking at that, and it seems to lend itself to this, because you've got multiple incidents, you have over multiple years by kind of an organization. He had an organization around him, and an organization under RICO, that's what the O stands for in RICO. An organization can be a legitimate business entity, or it can be just a gang. There are certain things you have to establish to see it as an organization legally, but it doesn't have to be a certified corporation. It could be a gang. It could be a crime family and stuff. And so if they're looking at his activity under that kind of umbrella, then certainly, that crime could be reopened and say this is a RICO predicate act, and then you add a couple more acts under the sex trafficking, the drugs, the guns. Those are all potential RICO predicate acts, and then you build a RICO case that way. And certainly that 1999 shooting could be the cornerstone of a case like that.
What do you think the likelihood is that Diddy will be charged in relation to the shooting on the federal level?
I don't know. None of us are privy to what they have inside the investigation as far as, whether or not Diddy will be charged. I will say that when you get to the point where you're executing search warrants, which means you've been before a federal judge or magistrate with an affidavit that says, we believe that this specific, as I started, but this specific evidence of this crime is in this place, that place being his two houses, you have to think he's the subject. And you have to think that they are on the road to charging him. And so whether or not they complete that journey down that road, it's unknown. But they're pretty far down that road if they're already executing search warrants.
So what does Diddy have to say about all this? Well, he finally broke his silence on social media since the raids, posting some pictures of his daughter to celebrate Easter. He hasn't commented on the raids publicly though, but in the weeks after several of the civil suits were filed last year, he did make a statement. It read, quote, "Enough is enough. For the last couple of weeks, I have sat silently and watched people try to assassinate my character, destroy my reputation and my legacy. Sickening allegations have been made against me by individuals looking for a quick payday. Let me be absolutely clear. I did not do any of the awful things being alleged. I will fight for my name, my family, and for the truth." In response to the raids of Diddy's home, his attorney released a statement last Tuesday reading, quote, "Yesterday, there was a gross overuse of military-level force as search warrants were executed at Mr. Combs' residences. There's no excuse for the excessive show of force and hostility exhibited by authorities or the way his children and employees were treated." As far as the allegations dropped in Lil Rod's lawsuit, Diddy's attorney Sean Hawley says, quote, "His reckless name-dropping about events that are pure fiction and simply did not happen is nothing more than a transparent attempt to garner headlines. We have overwhelming, indisputable proof that his claims are complete lies. Our attempts to share this proof with Mr. Jones's attorney Tyrone Blackburn have been ignored, as Mr. Blackburn refuses to return our calls. We will address these outlandish allegations in court and take all appropriate action against those who make them." As for what's ahead with a reinvestigation into the shooting and potential criminal investigation into Diddy himself, that's still up in the air. But we'll continue to follow the story and bring you all the updates right here. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.